And then there he is, the man himself, Dr. Wilmer Leon, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, and host of Connecting the Dots. It comes and appears on YouTube. My man, what's happening this morning? You doing okay?
Well, man, excuse me. Good morning. I'm doing great, and thank you excuse me. Thank you for the invitation. And
always.
Got rave reviews as I always do when you joined me yesterday for the Connecting the Dots podcast. Greatly appreciate that.
Those people just being nice, man. That's all.
Well,
those people just being nice.
Wrong. That just means they're nice.
Well, I'm glad. I always appreciate doing the show. I always enjoy doing it, man. So anytime you want me, you got me.
Appreciate it.
But no, man, thank you for joining me this morning. So did you see the news that broke? I guess this broke yesterday. Mexico, Canada have apparently come to some kind of deal with Donald Trump in order to avoid tariffs. Now, just so the audience will know what we're talking about, Donald Trump, out the blue, decides he wants to have a trade war against the world, starting with Mexico and Canada. And this is pretty wild considering our trade relationships with both of these countries and considering that Donald Trump had renegotiated NAFTA with them in his previous administration. But okay, fair enough. 25% tariffs on things coming out of Canada. To make that weirder, it is unclear what he wanted to get out of it. Now, he said it was fentanyl and it was the issue of immigration. Now, he was able to make a deal with Shannonbaum after a conversation apparently that they had yesterday, where she said she'd send troops to the border. Apparently, I guess they'll take more stringent means of dealing with the fentanyl issue. But basically, they've come to some kind of terms that are acceptable where they can postpone those tariffs for at least a month. Apparently, after a conversation with Canada, same thing. They're postponing tariffs for a month. So there's that part. China has retaliated. But give me your take on Mexico and Canada effectively capitulating. I mean, isn't this kind of, I don't want to say proof of concept because this is absolutely absurd what Donald Trump is doing. But does it help their case when they're falling over themselves in order to come to some kind of terms for an obviously shakedown? Because I don't know another word for it other than shakedown.
I agree with you on that point. I was incredibly disappointed to hear that after being so adamant about their positions, that both Sheinbaum and Trudeau backed down. They once again allowed the bully on the playground to take their lunch money, and I don't understand. I don't understand the long-term logic here, because so they've been able to come to an agreement on a 30-day suspension on the implication of tariffs. So where will we be on day 31? I can only imagine that Trump will become even more aggressive in his approach with both Mexico and with Canada on day 31, because that's what bullies do. I punked you on Monday, and I'm gonna punk you next Monday until you let me know that there's going to be some resistance. So particularly on the Canada side of the equation, only, and I say particularly in terms of Canada, only in terms of the discussion about fentanyl is not a Canadian issue. And Trudeau also, I think, had a lot of leverage as it relates to oil production and the impact that raising oil would have on the Midwest cities or Midwest states, I'm sorry, that get a lot of that Canadian oil or Canadian gas. And if folks in Iowa and Idaho and North Dakota and South Dakota started experiencing not only higher gas prices, but higher prices for their Ford F-150 trucks, that was not going to bode well for Donald Trump over the long term. So why Trudeau was so afraid to use the leverage that he has. And not to mention, when you look at the response relative to hockey and basketball games where Canadians were booing the national anthem, that's an indication of Canadian sentiment. And I don't get it.
I mean, they got bullied.
Other than the bully wins again.
Yeah, they got bullied. I mean, to put it mildly, I mean, they got seriously bullied. I mean, I get it, right? I mean, you don't want any kind of disruption to your economies. By the same token, this creates a proof of concept.
Right.
And it's a proof of concept where the bully realizes, hey, I got by on this nonsense. I had no justification for it. It had nothing to do with right or wrong, had nothing to do with fair, had nothing to do with any of that stuff. I had the capability to do it. I was aggressive, and they capitulated. And again, he's doing the same thing now to Europe because he is effectively saying, I want you to pay me 5% for NATO. Oh, and by the way, I'm also now going to pass sanctions against you all. So this transatlantic association that it typically was taking place, okay, that seems to be over with, where, you know, the post-war orthodox is effectively broken down. And the report that came out yesterday was that Donald Trump was telling Ukraine, hey, you need to give me very rare minerals or else you won't be getting any weapons or anything else from us. So, you know, just be aware, if you want us to continue to give you weapons and support, you need to give us minerals. Now, this is pretty astonishing. This is pretty astonishing. And what's wild about it, Schultz came out and Schultz pointed out, says, this is very selfish. It's like, dude, shut up. Just shut up. It's like, oh, this is very selfish. No, duh, Schultz. I mean, what do you think they've been doing in Germany for the last, year, 2, 3 years? I mean, do you remember when, I think it was Macron, after Europe was paying 5 times more for energy than they were paying when they were getting the energy from Russia? And Macron went to Joe Biden and was like, Joe, aren't all of us in it together? Like, you know, aren't we in it for as long as it takes? Like, how are you charging us 5 times more? And of course, Macron never got a response to that because shut up and pay me. So, you know, if that was policy under Joe Biden, Trump has just ripped the mask off. And Schultz seemed shocked by the whole thing. Oh, wow. This seems very selfish. This doesn't seem fair. And right here, he claimed that the United States provided more military economic aid. Right here, it says, we're looking to do a deal with the Ukraine where we're going to secure what we're giving them with their rare earth and other things. Effectively saying, look, if you want us to continue your support, you need to give us rare earth minerals. That's what we need. That's what we want to get our hands on right now. That's astonishing. It's a shakedown. Shakedown politics.
There are a couple of things that come to me from what you just talked about. First of all, I don't understand why Sheinbaum in Mexico, why Trudeau in Canada, why Schultz in Germany don't come to the microphone and say, look, Donald Trump called me yesterday, and this is what he said. He said whatever he said. Folks, that makes no sense. We're not going to do it. Here's what I told him. 1 + 1 does not equal 7. I don't care how many times you pound on the table and scream it. The world is not flat. And oh, by the way, the sun does not revolve around the earth. I don't care how many times you go outside and think that it does. That's not what we're going to do. So with that being said.
They're scared.
One of the things that I think is very evident here is that this is not Donald Trump. This is what America does.
Right.
America does not negotiate. You capitulate first, and then the United States will explain the terms to you. That's how they've been operating, I would have to say, since the end of World War II. Joe Biden didn't negotiate anything with Schultz.
Yep.
Go back to Tony Blinken with the Chinese delegation in Anchorage, where China got up from the table and said, we're not going to sit here and listen to you lecture us. We're China, damn it. They're one of the few countries that will get up and walk away from the table. Russia won't even come to the table. Putin has already been very, very clear. I'll send some folks over there to talk to Zelensky, but you must bear in mind that he has no authority to sign anything. He can't agree to anything because he's no longer the president. So don't bother me with this. I got other things. I got bricks to run. I got real business to handle. So China and Russia are two of the few that will tell him, go pound sand. It'll be interesting to see what happens in Panama with the canal, with Lil Marco over there in Panama, trying to extort concessions. What, you're coming into my country and you're just going to tell me you're taking my canal? Why? Because
we can.
China has two ports on each end of the canal. They have one port. They have a port on one end and a port on the other end. And Panama, the United States claims Panama is charging the United States military, the United States Navy, too much in transit fees through the canal. Well, I thought it was capitalism. I thought it was about business. I thought there was a free market system. I thought Panama was a sovereign country.
That's
my mistake. My bad.
That's your mistake. We were pretending that they were free countries. We were pretending. That's what I mean, right? It seems like it's a new norm in regards to the orthodoxy. And by the way, I don't take any of that stuff as being credible. It's the excuse that you use to do the thing that you want to do anyway.
Right.
Hey, we have the ability to throw our weight around. This notion of us working with these countries, that's over with. If we can get what we want through compulsion, then we get what we want through compulsion. And at the point where you're seeing Panama saying, okay, we'll kill the relationship with China. At the point where you're seeing Canada and Mexico saying, okay, we'll come to the table. At the point where you see Greenland or Denmark telling other European leaders, shh, just don't say anything. Just be quiet about it. Don't make them mad. Yeah, right. I know, right? It's like if we stay small in the corner, maybe he'll forget that we're standing here. I mean, they effectively told Europe to not make a big deal about it because they don't necessarily want Trump to double down on the issue. What they're missing is that Trump is serious about getting his hands on Greenland if he can get his hands on Greenland. And so, you pretending to be small in the corner. Oh, I don't think he sees me. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. None of that's going to work. I mean, Schultz come out. He says, where is it? He's saying it's selfish. Wow, where is it? There it is. He said it's selfish to effectively exploit or extort these crystals or these minerals out of the country. And it's like, dude, what part of any of this policy has it been for our own betterment at the expense of everybody else? And to your point, Russia and China are really the only two countries up to this point that have told them to go kick rocks. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're
Right.
beating you militarily on the battlefield in one case, and the other case is like we are an economic peer with you. We are not having this conversation where you're treating us like a vassal. We are not your vassal. Meaning they are very clear where they stand. They don't even accept the premise of these conversations. Europe, not so much. Not so much.
Some might argue from the Chinese perspective that they are superior economically when you look at their production capacity,
Right.
when you look at the growth of their economy. I want to say their economy grew last year at almost 6%, when the United States struggled to get 2.5%.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the amount of U.S. debt that China still holds, I know they sold off a lot of it. So some would argue that they are outpacing the United States economically, and so again, I just wonder what it is, and this could be my naivete. Why didn't the president of Panama turn to Marco Rubio and say, "Man, get out of my country, get out of town by sundown"? Please. I mean, don't go, and Marco, don't go away mad. Just go away.
Just go away.
Because I'm not giving you the canal. And then turn to China. I don't, and see what a lot of people don't realize or don't remember. As I understand, when the United States invaded Panama, going after Noriega, the United States spent 2 weeks and didn't get him. That remember, because when you say to somebody, when was the last time the United States won a military conflict? And sometimes people will say Panama. Well, no. When the United States went in and they were there for 2 weeks and left, they didn't leave with Manuel Noriega. He turned himself in. He held up and he escaped from the community where they thought he was holed up. They couldn't find him because he had escaped. And then he went to this Catholic church and was held up in this church for a couple of weeks. He was given cover by the Catholic Church, and then he surrendered. My point is, so folks will say, well, that's a difference without a distinction. No, you went in with B-1 bombers and all kind of stuff. And you didn't come out with what you went in for.
Right.
Stand up to this clown. Somebody, please.
Stand up to the bully, man. You got to stand up to the bully. I get it, right? As a country, there are all sorts of economic realities that you are concerned about. But I don't think they fully get that this is proof of concept. Like, this legitimizes what Trump is doing by their action in response to what he's doing. I mean, he's effectively saying, because you don't take policy like this if you think you are going to come to bad ends. You take policy like this because you think they're going to capitulate. We can do this. We can hurt them worse than they can really ever hurt us. And so, yeah, we're going to pursue this course of action. What Canada, Mexico, Panama, Europe, what all of these countries are doing is effectively saying he's right. He's right. He's right. We don't have the ability to stand up to him in this way. I would say that they were better off going with their original premise. At the very least, you would have been far more respected, as opposed to whatever this is, this complete capitulation. And, to point something else out, Trump finally owned up to the fact that America may be hurt by the tariff war. I mean, for God's sake, he's talking about having a tariff war with the entire world. Canada, Mexico, South Africa, Europe, meaning the entire European Union at this point. I mean, you effectively saying that you're having a sanction war with the world, or a tariff war with the world. All right, you can do that, But understand that's consequences, and those consequences will be felt by Americans. And up to this point, he's been like, okay, there are no consequences. This is perfectly fine. It's not a tax. We won't be paying more. And finally, someone must have set him down and said, hey, Mr. President, there will be consequences for this. We may take a hit for this. But again, in that speech or in that conversation, pointed out, but we'll be better off. Basically, it was like, okay, this may hurt a little bit, but ultimately, we will be better off by going this and pursuing this particular course of action. Now, I would imagine in his mind, he's thinking, I want more trade. I want to create a difference in trade imbalance. I want to protect the industries that are here in the United States. I want to bring jobs back to the United States, meaning I don't doubt that he has all sorts of ideas in his head. But do you think those ideas are going to translate to reality in the sense of either jobs coming back, either more investment in America, I don't think either.
And let me tell you why I can so emphatically say no. Because I've studied economics. That's why. I've studied economics. And I also happen to know, as you know, some pretty smart economists. Linwood Tahi, Jack Rasmus, Radhika Desai. We know some economists.
Yeah.
And they all say the same thing.
Professor Wolf.
It's not going to work. And let me give your audience who may not have studied economics to the degree that I have just some ideas. And I say, I'm not saying that to say that, the light above my head is a halo. No, the light above my head is a light because I'm not sitting in the dark. But I have studied some economics. And we talked about this yesterday. You can't just on Monday say, I'm bringing jobs back to the United States, and then jobs start flowing back to the United States. If that were the reality, it would have happened when Joe Biden said it.
Right.
It didn't happen. It would have happened when Barack Obama said it. It didn't happen. It would have happened when Bill Clinton said it. It didn't happen. It would have happened when George W. Bush said it. It didn't happen. Why? Because with the deindustrialization of the United States, along with sending jobs overseas, we then stopped developing industrial policy. They're trying to sell U.S. steel to Japan. How do you have an industrial policy and you're not making your own steel? And we haven't really made our own steel in the United States. I can't tell you how long it's been, but so there's no policy, which is long-term planning to bring industry back to your country. It's not there. Part of your trade imbalance has to do with the huge deficits that you run and the fact that you've had to go out to the bond market to foreign countries to get foreign countries like China to finance your debt. That contributes to your trade imbalance. So tariffs, putting taxes on your own people, which is what tariffs are, that's not going to make up that deficit.
Right.
Because you're in deficit spending and you're borrowing money from other people to pay for that. This is not that difficult to figure out. And final point, one of the differences, say, between today and 40 years ago, when the United States could walk around, we're the only sheriff in town. We're no longer the only sheriff in town. It's called BRICS. There is a collaborative, cooperative trading bloc that now rivals the United States supremacy. And why Sheinbaum in Mexico? Why Trudeau in Canada? Why Schultz in Germany, who was just obliterated when the United States blew up Nord Stream? How do you sit by with another country claiming to be an ally when one of their stated goals is the deindustrialization of your country?
Right.
If you invite me to your house for dinner and you're showing me your prize crystal collection that started when your grandmother started collecting crystal, and every time you open up a cabinet, I knock something over and break it, you're quickly going to ask me to leave your home.
You would think. I mean, ideally, I mean, but see, but
no, I know you. You would ask me to leave your home.
But see, therein lies the rub, right? Like, you blow up Nord Stream. Trump knows that the U.S. blew up Nord Stream. He's said as much that this was something that Joe Biden did. Like, he wasn't even putting on the pretense. Like, maybe a few Ukrainians in a dinghy decided to get together and just, blow up a pipe. Okay, he owned up to the fact that this was something that the United States did. If you know that, and you know it, you're perfectly aware of it. We blew up their pipeline. Schultz was standing there on stage when Joe Biden said he was going to blow it up. And the strongest position that Schultz got was, how high do you need my ass to be when you kick it, sir? When you see that.
Here was the line. Here was the line. They asked Joe Biden about Nord Stream. Schultz is standing next to him. Joe Biden says, it's not going to happen. And another reporter says, but Mr. President, that's not an American pipeline. It's not in American water. He says, doesn't matter. Not going to happen.
If the Russians go in, we'll stop it.
Schultz just stood there like boo-boo fool.
Yeah. The American president is talking about blowing up European infrastructure.
Yeah.
Infrastructure, by the way.
NATO allied.
Yes.
Article 5 responsible response.
That they need, by the way.
And
I mean, the fact that they were paying 5 times more for energy gets across the reason that the pipeline existed at all.
Well, it still exists. It still exists.
Well, one of them, yeah.
Viable
yeah.
That the United States will not allow Germany to turn the spigot on and turn the gas.
But
so
see,
the
that's my
whole
point.
thing is not destroyed.
But that's my point. If you're Trump and you see that, that is humiliating on so many levels. I mean, what conclusion do you come to? Like, right? I mean, if you literally watch your predecessor blow up a pipeline that they needed for their own economic security. You've watched Germany get deindustrialized. You've watched Europe go through all sorts of political consequences as a direct result of the money that is flowing out of Europe into the US because of the Ukraine war, or for that matter, because of the energy sanctions that Europe got pushed into passing. If you're Trump, you look at that. What are your thoughts? Like, what conclusion do you come to that, oh, wait, these are sovereign countries. Europe is a power that I need to reckon with. Or do you come to conclusion, okay, these are vassals. Mm-hmm. These are marks. I think it's the latter.
You are absolutely right. And the other question there is, and I think we're starting to see some response to this now, but winter hasn't gotten cold enough. Where are the Europeans on this? They're the ones that are suffering. They're the ones that are cold. They're the ones that are paying more to heat their homes. They're the ones that are losing their jobs. Their quality of life has changed dramatically as a result of austerity measures that have been imposed upon them over the last 15 years or so. What was one of the big issues in France, about 3 years ago, was raising the retirement age. Well, in the United States, that's not nearly as big of an issue in this country as it is in Europe.
Right.
because there's an entire lifestyle that generationally that they have become accustomed to. And God bless them for, you know, I'd like to retire at 60 and know that I have a pension and that I have health care. And, you know, the way that the lifestyle that the Germans are used to, the lifestyle that the French have become used to, and the Italians and the Greeks, the oligarchs are doing everything in their power to decimate that.
Mm-hmm.
And are fairly successful in the process. Where are the people?
Well, those people came out for the European elections, voted further to the right. You get the German government that collapsed, so you get the AfD that seems to be on the ascendancy. In France, you get the National Rally. It's called, National Rally, Le Pen's party, taking prominence with them having to go through all of these maneuvers to keep them out of office. The Europeans are there. I mean, if you look at Romania, like, God, man, that's a really good point. They are doing any and everything in their power extra constitutionally to prevent that push and that move from Europe. I mean, think of Romania. They literally annulled the Romanian election because Carl Gugescu was most likely person to win it. He won the first round. He was most likely going to win the second round. They literally annulled the election to prevent him from getting in the office, saying that there were TikTok ads that were put by the Russians. Okay, this wasn't obviously ended up not being the Russians. I didn't believe it was Russia from the beginning, considering we had the same nonsense here with Twitter ads that they tried to say was coming from the Russians. If you look at Georgia, the Georgian government, who does not want to be pushed into fighting the Russians on another front, they stood up. Georgian Dream ends up winning, and you get weeks of this push to try to overthrow the Georgian government with the spook French-born Georgian president. Stop making people your president if they're not born in your country. Just a heads up. When they're doing everything in their power to overthrow that government. Now, they weren't able to do it. They weren't able to get that Maidan 2.0 moment, but they were doing everything in their power to do it. And same thing with Hungary or Slovakia, where they were having all of this pressure against these governments, meaning there is a push, there's
activity.
There's activity, but they're doing everything in their power. After the European elections, where all of these people kind of moved to get rid of the Greens and get rid of all of these war parties, what happened? They picked von der Leyen once again, pretty much ignoring any and everything that took place in regards to that election. They blew it off. So whether it's the AfD, whether it's Le Pen's party in France, whether it's the Romanian Carl Gugescu and his people backing him in order to push him in office, whether it's Georgia and the Dream Party, Slovakia, Hungary, there is movement.
There is movement, but this could be my misinterpretation of this, and I say that in all sincerity, because that's not my primary focus. There is movement, but it seems to be movement more within the prescribed parameters of acceptance. I don't see any substantive. Well, I'll put it this way: Nord Stream is still turned off.
Yeah.
So there's movement and there's anger, but Nord Stream has not been turned on. The one remaining pipeline has not been turned back on. The United States is still dictating conditions to those European countries. That hasn't changed. So that's when I say I want to see something in the street, that I want to see pushback. I want to see pushback that results in that sends the message to the elite and to the oligarch: if let them eat cake is no longer an acceptable answer. That's my point.
No, I agree with you, man. I mean, part of my biggest issue with Zelensky, and I have several, is that you've allowed your ethical and legal responsibility to be usurped by a foreign government, a foreign power. And
Mhm.
Europe is doing the exact same thing. I
Mhm.
mean, if you really think about it in real terms, Europe is also being sacrificed at the altar of America. It's almost like we're cannibalizing countries that we consider to be our allies at one point, and they have stood there, allowing themselves to be cannibalized. China, for its part, retaliated. And so, right here, the Chinese government responded minutes after the new tariffs came into force on Tuesday. It included restrictions on certain American goods, a 15% tariff on coal and liquefied natural gas, 10% tariff on crude oil, agricultural machinery, and some vehicles. So, China is not taking it lying down. China is also taking them to the World Trade Organization. I don't know how that's going to, if that's going to do anything. It, at the very least, shows grievances. It says right here, seriously violates the rules of the World Trade Organization and undermines the normal economic and trade cooperation between China and the United States. What do you think? I mean, give me your analysis on this. Is it that we're just in a new world? Is this a new norm that seemed to be developing where the US has come to the conclusion this ally system doesn't work? This, you know, this idea that we have allies abroad, okay, this doesn't work. We need to be Fortress America. And this notion of the post-war, you know, post-Second War framework, the orthodoxy that the world functions on, that's over. Is that what we're looking at? Because we seem to be in a new norm.
We are not, I don't believe that we are in a new norm. I believe that we are going through the birth pains of a new reality. As Antonio Gramsci says, the crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. I think that's the quote. And
Mhm.
we, I believe, are right now at the front end of this interregnum, and we are seeing this morbid, the appearance of these of these of these morbid symptoms, because the empire is dying. It is not dead. The empire is dying, and what is the saying? The last kicks of the dying mule can be the most dangerous.
Yep.
So we are in this process, and I think we're only at the front end of the process. And I have no idea what this thing is going to look like when it's over. But I don't think that new, I don't think really the new period has even begun. I call them, I've said a number of times that there are epochs in history where you don't realize at the moment that you're in the moment. It's only upon reflection, and it can take years after the event that you look back and say, oh, remember when I was 9 years old and Dr. King was assassinated? Remember when I was 10 years old? You know, and you go back and you now look at the 60s and you go, damn, that was buck wild. They would, you know, I think we're in one of those periods now. I call them Oppenheimer moments. And I call them Oppenheimer moments because the history tells us when Oppenheimer watched the explosion of the gadget, which was the name of the first bomb, he quoted Hindu scripture saying, "I have become death. I am now," right. He knew at that moment that was the moment. And so I think we are in that another one of those epochs now. But we're at the very front end of this thing. And I believe one of the elements that's going to have to happen is the unrest that I'm talking about is going to take place here. And I'm not calling for it, but as a political scientist, I'm looking at the elements of it. And it's like baking a cake. You put the flour in there, you put the eggs in there, you put the butter in there, and you put it in the oven, and you pretty much know. I don't have to be a baker to know that a cake's coming out of that oven. So we're seeing the elements. And I think one of the big, and I'll end it here, is one of the big factors to me is the parties are losing control of their constituents.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is an indication to me that those that have traditionally voted Democrats are now looking for another space. The left is looking for the true left is looking for another space, and they can't find one.
The Bhagavad Gita, that is one of the most badass lines. I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of becoming death, the destroyer of worlds, USAID, or at the very least, destroyer of countries. So, Donald Trump has came through, put a freeze on USAID. The office.
I got about 5 minutes, and I got to go to class.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me show this.
No, we can wrap up. We can wrap up with USAID. But I'm just saying that I need that to be the last because I got to go to class.
Okay. So Democrats have found their new thing to which they want to fight for, and that new thing is USAID. This is them outside the offices of USAID protesting the removal of USAID.
Mm-hmm.
This is the problem, right? I mean, USAID has been out there destroying governments, whether it was Romania, whether it was Georgia, whether it was Ukraine. I mean, you could go around the world and show the government. Venezuela is another one. That one wasn't even under Trump. And they're out here protesting it reflexively because it was Trump that did it without any full recognition or even kind of awareness of how USAID functions in the larger world and the effect that it has on these other countries. We can close it on this. Give me your take on this. This is absurd. This is absurd.
So you hit it right on the head. There's a missing element of this discussion, and that is USAID is actually one of the fronts used by the CIA for regime change, along with the National Endowment for Democracy. That's another CIA front entity. So folks need to understand, yes, the AIDS drug assistance that goes to Africa, if that comes through USAID, I don't know if it does, but I know that has been cut off by Donald Trump's decision to cut off American funding for foreign aid. But I don't know if that actually comes through USAID. But just the food aid is a very positive thing. People do benefit from that. I can't debate that in the least. When those bags of wheat and flour and grain, and when they show up and it says from the American people, people do get fed. But that is also a bludgeon that is all behind that bludgeon is regime change. In many instances, not all, but in many instances, is regime change in your country. Look at that Venezuelan truck convoy from a couple of years ago that got stopped at the border and attacked, and the United States tried to blame that on Maduro, only to find out that whole thing was a setup, trying to blame Maduro, trying to bring about regime change with displeased Venezuelans.
Right.
So if you're going to talk about the story, then talk about the whole story. You can't leave out one of the fundamental elements of why USAID. And I know John Kennedy started it in the 60s, but I can't believe that Allen Dulles wasn't sitting next to him saying, hey, here's, or, so that's my take there.
Yeah, man, just astonishing. Just astonishing. That is greatly disheartening to watch. Man,
And to listen to.
it is.
Because, Rachel Maddow, tell the whole story. Joy Reid, when you talk about USAID, tell the whole story. That's because it is what it is. We're not making this up. This isn't conspiracy theory. So that people can truly understand, and I'll say this is the last thing I'll say. Remember last week when Donald Trump said he was going to release the documents on the Kennedy files?
Yeah.
Right? I wonder if this attack by him on USAID is a follow-on to that.
Interesting.
I'm not saying it is because I don't know the answer to that. I'm just, when I heard, okay, we're going to release the unredacted files on who was responsible for the King assassination and the Kennedy assassination, I said, well, Donald Trump has not been happy with the intelligence, with the, as he called, the deep state.
Right.
He now wants to expose the deep state, the FBI and the CIA. And now he attacks USAID, which is a front for the CIA. I said, wow, I wonder if this is another attack on the deep state.
They're related. Interesting.
I don't know, but that's why I connect the dots. I don't know.
No pun intended. Connecting the dots. Dr. Wilmer Leon, he's a political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, and host of Connecting the Dots. Thank you, my man. Be safe. Have a good one.